Valentine's Day brings all the love, but one thing it does not bring is the joy of bringing down the holiday lights. They are officially over. They always come down right after Valentine's Day. And this morning when I was coming into the office, I saw the crews working in the snow, taking down the Christmas holiday lights. So it is 4 months of definitely hallmark card experiences driving through Old Town, downtown Fort Collins, especially on your evenings, early mornings when it's snowing, flurries, and seeing those holiday lights along with those historic buildings. But no more. They come down and go back up again first week of November in 2023 for the new year. So this is live in Fort Collins. My name is Patrick Sugup with Sugup Real Estate Services. We talk to you guys about everything there is to know about Fort Collins. And each week we go live on Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. to talk to you about things that have happened over the last week, sometimes things that are happening. City Council review that goes on Tuesday evenings. We talk about what happened there. Some developments under review, preliminary, conceptual neighborhood meetings. And then we finalize our meeting with our live event going through a neighborhood tour. And this week we are looking at a Northwest neighborhood, one of the more popular neighborhoods in the Northwest, the Ponds. We've worked with a few clients that have bought here. In fact, our team, Zach, Connor, Izzy, myself, and Ashley, we've worked with a few different clients buying and selling in this neighborhood. It's definitely one of the more desirable ones. So we'll do a 2-minute video at the end. This will be about 10 to 15 minutes long. So let's rock and roll. Jumping into things that have happened. Kind of interesting that we had 3 things kind of correspond with each other. We had Bike to Work Day on February 10th. It was not terribly cold, but cold enough. There was over 50 stations throughout Fort Collins. People could eat, stop, get coffee, donuts, drinks. Different businesses sponsor stations. And then there was a closing ceremonies on Linden Street afterwards. But then, unfortunately, right after that, we had 2 different deaths with cyclists on streets in Fort Collins, one on Harmony and McMurray, and the other one on LeMay near Swallow. Definitely very sad things happen. When that happens, apparently the cyclist had accidentally gone into the intersection when it was not necessarily their turn. Which then also leads me into what was one of the things that was discussed on City Council last night was what was called a zero action plan, 0 deaths, fatalities, or serious injuries with cyclists and vehicles throughout the city of Fort Collins by the year 2032. And there's lots of different things that they've talked about on how to do that. Roundabouts, more active modes of transportation, getting people out of their cars and into buses or onto bikes, and not necessarily slower speed limits, but definitely more roundabouts, narrower streets, different ideas. But there's other cities that have accomplished this of 0 deaths, fatalities. Boulder, Jersey City, Fort Collins had 5 less deaths with the preliminary numbers in 2022 versus 2021, but the goal is 0 by 2032. So those 3 things happened. So definitely sorry for those families that with those 2 cyclists, definitely a sad deal, but City of Fort Collins is actively trying to eliminate that from our roads. So hopefully we can do that. Topgolf officially announced it's going to be going into Timnath, south of Costco, and the Landera development, 400 homes, 2 million square feet of commercial, and Topgolf will be one of the anchor tenants, if you will. 2 stories instead of the 3 stories that you see in Thornton. They say that it's going to be kind of more in a valley, so it's not going to be as visible from the eyesight on I-25, but 175-foot tall nets, concern about birds, and just aesthetics, eyesight, things of that nature. So the town of Timnath will need to get over 600 signatures for this to go from a approved measure to a ballot measure. And so we'll see and watch how that goes. The other thing that is happening is an increase. City of Fort Collins is going to be asking the citizens of Fort Collins this fall for an increase in taxes. They're going to do this either by an increase of property taxes by 5 mils,
Increased taxes on marijuana, alcohol sales, increased sales tax. They're going to try to find a way to increase taxes because we have about a $30 to $39 million annual shortfall, which is huge numbers, to say the least. And the shortfalls come between with our goals of affordable housing, transit, but also aging out recreation, parks and rec facilities that need to have updates. So the city of Fort Collins is going to be going to the citizens asking for some sort of tax increase to cover that gap. So we will be watching that as well. Just today, there was an article that came out in the Colorado that there are, in June, the state of Colorado passed basically a bill that says we cannot, national EPA standards are 15 parts per billion of lead in water is acceptable, but state of Colorado decreased that to 5 parts per billion of lead. And there were some schools that had fixtures and faucets that did test higher. Putnam, Polaris, Bennett, and Irish Elementary, to name a few. They will have to go through some faucet exchanges, potentially some plumbing, different things of that nature. Those are some older schools in kind of the downtown, Old Town area, but they will get retested, fixed, and then resent back to the state to get those adjusted and fixed. Sorry if you hear some sawing and scraping. We are getting our house remodeled, and it is a sight to see. All righty. So city council meeting last night was kind of definitely something interesting for people to watch, because there was going to be a work session on the land use code, with it being sent back to council with a 4,000 plus petitions signed. And now it's about how are we going to address this, and either move forward or rework it and everything like that. So people were definitely interested in watching that. And I'll get to that in just a second. The other thing besides the zero action plan that we've already talked about of 0 deaths or fatalities on the road by 2032 was snow plowing. They very briefly talked about snow plowing. They were concerned about bike lanes with snow plows, but in general, the city of Fort Collins, from my perspective, does a pretty phenomenal job, especially on bike trails, paved bike trails, getting those cleared. We actually just did an entire podcast episode. If you haven't, it's going to be released, I think, today, actually. So if you haven't watched that Fort Collins Fellas podcast, we actually talked to Parks and Rec director. And one thing that Fort Collins does amazing is all of its parks, recreations, paved trails, and how well they do at clearing that snow on days like today. But they were concerned there was snow getting pushed into bike lanes. How long does that take to get cleared? And ultimately, I think it's kind of a moot point, because I think we do a pretty good job on clearing our roads here in Fort Collins. Amazing infrastructure, great vehicles to take care of our roads. Now, jumping into the land use code, this wasn't as exciting as I was hoping it would be, because really it was talking more about how are we going to do our public outreach to get people involved with this discussion, so that everyone has a say of sorts on when this goes back to city council, how this gets reworked and ultimately passed or not passed by the city council. So they talked about spending $150,000 on outreach, $40,000 of which would be spent on mailers. And I'm just like, I'm in marketing, I'm in real estate, I'm in sales, and spending $40,000 on mailers just seems like burning money to me. But what do I know? But they definitely want full engagement and help stop spread of misinformation. One of the things that they want to do is to pass a full land use code phase 1 change, not just parts. Kelly Olson was very vocal he no longer supports the guiding principles. The guiding principles are to increase capacity, enable more affordability, allowing more diverse housing choices, making the code easier to read. Kelly Olson saying that he no longer supports those guiding principles, and he is not for a code that artificially stimulates more density and growth with little impact to affordable housing. And he believes that it's really throwing gasoline on a fire for affordability. So we will see how that goes. They do not want to rush it. The goal is kind of April, May time period, but it sounds like They're going to go back to another work session in April. They're going to have some listening sessions in March. But my guess is it's going to be mid to late summer before anything even gets close to passing or getting resolved. But currently, it seems like the city council members are very interested on public outreach, getting people involved, and trying to help everyone understand. Again, things of most contentious were neighborhood meetings that were going to be removed for just basic reviews, ADUs, triplex duplexes in any neighborhoods. Those were pretty much the biggest things that were going to change. And they definitely all were on board with changing the name instead of a land development code. That was almost kind of like a very hot button to push. If you heard land development code, you were either with it, and it was, or without it. And it was 50% either way. But, you know, me and my team definitely are spending a lot of time focusing on and trying to understand this, because it's probably one of the biggest changes to the Fort Collins real estate market. It absolutely is, since 1997, when the last land use code change really overall change happened. And this will absolutely change how people's lands are valued, how people can use their properties. So we, Zach, Connor, Ashley and Izzy, myself, are definitely staying on top of this because it's extremely important. If you have any questions, we actually did do a podcast with Rebecca Everett, who is very involved, very knowledgeable. So definitely go watch that podcast if you haven't. Fort Collins Fellas, we did an entire 50-minute interview with her. She answers a ton of great questions. Jumping into the developments under review, and I only got 4 minutes left, so we'll jump through this real quick. 220 East Oak Street. This is really right close downtown. There's some cool, small, single-story commercial spaces there. They are looking at basically raising that, popping the tops, going up, adding 38 dwelling units and around 2,000 square feet of commercial. Mountain Sage expansion. This is basically a school on the east side of Timberline and Prospect, looking to add 9,000 square feet. Dish Wireless adding a rooftop telecommunication equipment on the rooftop of 350 East Horsetooth. So that's nothing too crazy, but definitely, again, more density in Old Town is coming, and it will continue to come. People will pop tops raise because there's a ton of value in a lot of Old Town and downtown spaces. Alrighty, today's video is the ponds, and we are going to jump into this video. If you have any questions, to reach out. This is a neighborhood in the Northwest. Homes here will range anywhere between $650,000 to up to $1 million. 21 homes sold in the area in 2022. So definitely a good opportunity if you're looking at buying in this neighborhood. There's a good amount of homes that turn over. Houses are really built between 1998 and 2016, but really there was one small section of this that was built in 2016. Most of them was 1998 to early 2010s. Houses can be anywhere between 0.13 acres to half an acre, and even really 1.5 acres. There's some very, very custom, very expensive homes in this area, but the majority of them are going to be 0.13 to 0.5 acres, anywhere from 2,500 to 4,500 square feet. A lot of these houses have basements, 2-story ranch type style. There's phenomenal walking paths throughout the neighborhood, as you kind of can see here as we fly through. Lots of green space, natural area, natural grasses. Lots of people out walking their dogs. You can literally walk from your house, if you lived in this neighborhood, to Horsetooth Reservoir in probably 30 to 45 minutes just over that ridge. And something that's definitely really interesting. One interesting thing here, though, is because you're so close to the foothills, yes, you're right there in the mountains, and you have access to Lori State Park that's very close. Horsetooth Reservoir is very close, but you don't get the view of the foothills because you're just right there. You're in the foothills, basically, but you don't get the view of the foothills. You're right next to the CSU Equine Center, but definitely a very desirable neighborhood in Northwest Fort Collins. There is a decent amount of rentals in and around the area, but as one of my favorite clients said when he was buying in here, he was from Chicago, and I said, there's a little bit of a fair amount of rentals in and around the area, within a half mile to a mile. He said, well, where I'm from, within a half mile to a mile, there's shootings every day, or every other day, and so living next to a rental is no big deal. So perspective is everything. And again, when I talk with people moving here from all over the country, I talk to them that one of the things that I lack most is perspective, because I am born and raised here in Fort Collins. So some of the things that I might think are, funky or weird might just be, normal or something else to other people. But it is at 15 minutes and 20 seconds. I am running over. I promise everybody I do not go more than 15 minutes. There are no questions. If you have any questions, never hesitate to feel free to text, call, or email me. But I appreciate you guys watching. Wednesday evenings, 6 p.m. We will see you next week. Bye, everybody.